Hey there, welcome to another exciting edition of Cambridge Inside Out. My name's Robert Winters,
And I'm Judy Nathans.
and we're now streaming through January 2018.
Yes,
We're
it's
January
January
16th.
16th,
16th,
right,
yes.
the day after Martin Luther King Day.
That's right, yeah.
So there was no city council meeting, however, there was, today we went to a meeting.
Right, that's right, that's
Yeah.
right. Actually, I saw a lot of photos of the people at the MLK, various MLK events.
Yes, was that on your,
I forgot to actually post the things. I was too busy.
I saw it somewhere,
but-
maybe it was on the city's website.
Yeah, there was a really nice photo. A lot of the political leadership of the city all assembled.
I think they had a picture of Elizabeth Warren.
Elizabeth Warren
She
was
showed
right
up
there in the
there.
center, and
Yeah.
Sally Domenico was there, various city councilors from Mayor Mark
That was
McGovern.
on your site, I think. No?
I don't think I put that up
Oh.
there, but I probably should.
All right. Never, well, it was
Yeah,
on somebody's
Elizabeth
site.
Warren's kind
It
of
was
like
on
a
the city
superstar,
website.
so it would be kind of
I
like,
guess so.
you know,
She went to a
wants get
few
in the
things
frame
that
with her
day.
there,
Yeah, right.
Yeah, she's
Oh,
making
boy.
waves.
Yeah.
Right. But we went to a meeting just before.
Ad hoc
Yeah,
committee,
an ad hoc
rules committee,
on the city council
which
rules.
was just appointed last week.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Was it that? Yeah, I
Yeah,
guess it
because it
was
was
just
only
last
2
week.
weeks, because
Yeah.
they have to report on the 22nd.
Yeah, I think so. At the inaugural meeting, they adopt provisionally the rules of the city council. But as I often like to point out, city council rules includes the listing and structure, number, size of quorum for various city council
Yeah.
committees.
I'm so glad I got a copy. How many are there anyway?
It's like 30 some odd rules
Okay.
in there.
Yeah.
And then of course then they default to Robert's rules for other things. It's not
Right.
anything that's
But
specifically
this is
mentioned
specific to the city, Cambridge City
there.
Council.
For the Cambridge
Yeah.
City Council, yeah. Now, I spoke at the meeting, as did John Hawkinson, at
At the
this
public
meeting,
comment
at the
part.
beginning of the
Mhm.
meeting. So he was going on about sort of little micro changes to the various rules and with the
Mhm.
numbering systems or whatever. He seemed to think it's a good idea to allow people to be carrying placards and
Oh,
signs.
I see where
I
this
don't
came from.
personally
Okay.
agree with that.
Yeah.
But I was a little more interested in the actual city council committees themselves.
Yeah, what they're called.
Yeah, because that is part of the rules, and I had a little fun with it.
Yeah,
um,
well, I
over
like
the-
your website with looking at the different.
Yeah, well, actually, let's show a few of these
Yeah.
things. So
Okay.
I was thinking, it was 4 years ago. Actually, I think it was 2 years ago, but it was actually 4 when they consolidated some of the committees.
Right.
They'd gone from maybe about
2012, yeah.
in there maybe 15 years ago there was
Mhm.
about maybe 14 committees. It had gone up to about 17.
Yeah,
And they decided to consolidate them, as
Right.
Councilor Simmons was pointing out, largely because they were having a hard time getting people to show up for meetings. They figured, well, if we have fewer committees, maybe we can convince people to come to more
Yeah.
of those ones at least. And actually, the number of committee meetings for the term actually dropped
uh-huh.
overall from past years.
You mean
but-
the number they held?
Yeah,
Uh-huh.
yeah. But that's not surprising if there are fewer committees.
Yeah,
They were largely it was the
Ordinance was
the
a-
ordinance
yeah.
was like 40 some odd committees.
because all the zoning stuff has to come before,
Yeah.
or any kind of change in the bylaws or the municipal ordinances, right?
That's right. Got to
Yeah.
go through the ordinance committee. So there's some sort of so the ordinance committee is sort of the heavy hitter committee,
Right.
and I guess it takes a certain type of person to be willing to be the chair or co-chair of that,
Mhm.
because it's a lot of heavy lifting. And
Yeah.
actually, the hardest part I think about being a chair or co-chair of the ordinance committee is not so much the fact that you have to chair a lot of meetings.
Yeah,
It's the fact that you end up being the person who's doing close quarters negotiation with various parties.
right, it gets a
especially
little
with-
political.
It can get very political.
Because you have neighborhood groups, you have different constituencies, you have your own kind of base, but then
Yeah.
you have to, do what's right for the city.
That's right.
Um,
Well, ultimately,
yeah.
hopefully, that's what they all do. What's right for
Well,
the city, right?
We would like to think that of our government,
We
our
would
federal government,
certainly-
you ultimately
certainly
do what's
would.
right for the country, but that isn't what's happening.
Not always how it
No.
works out. But the thing, there was once upon a time that was just the chair of the ordinance committee, and
One chair,
and I think it's actually worked out. It's been a good plan to
Yeah.
have it be co-chairs, and
yes,
and unofficially, because we don't really have political parties as such in
Mhm.
the city, but
right,
at least at the municipal level. But to have at least two somewhat different points of view represented
mhm,
among the two co-chairs, to give some balance
Yes.
and a sense of fairness. And also, I'd say for some of the people who are involved in zoning legislation,
Yeah.
2 different avenues in. You know, if you want to talk to the chair to kind of force an issue a little
Yeah.
bit like that, you don't want to be stuck with having to only deal with the chair, the co-chair who
Right.
hates you.
Right.
So, right, so, or who just is thoroughly unsympathetic to your point of view, right? So I think it's worked out actually pretty well, and it's been productive.
So the new co-chairs are Craig Kelly and
Dennis
Carlisle,
Carlisle.
who continues. He was.
It continues, right, so Leland Chung is gone, so now Craig Kelly has agreed to do that, which is, I think, a pretty generous thing to do, because, they'll probably.
So people are asked, and then they can decide if they want to or not, or do you automatically take it if the mayor asks you? Or do you lobby for it?
You lobby for it.
Okay.
I think as during, and, it was actually pretty informative, the meeting we were at earlier today, because Denise Simmons was pointing out that there have been times when the mayor would be, and she has been mayor a couple of times, was actually trying to ask people, could you please, and some of the councilors were saying, I don't want to serve on any more than 2 committees or 1 committee or whatever.
Yeah.
And actually getting them to actually agree to serve at all on some of the committees was getting more difficult. Now, that's not a good thing.
No, maybe it's because they have too many jobs.
Maybe they're distracted, and actually sometimes it was
It is
because.
well,
if you were considering running for another office, which has been the case at some times,
then they want to wait time.
then they didn't really want to be too burdened by the job part of the job.
You shouldn't be running for office if you're already in it.
Well, find time to do both, right?
Yeah.
So anyway, so the only one who actually has chairs right now is the ordinance committee, and they already have at least 1 meeting scheduled on the Kroon petition,
that's
which is
next week? Or is it
it's the one really
Yes.
actually live zoning petition.
Right.
And I had thought that was just going to get refiled, but it actually went through the planning board last week, and now it's going through the ordinance committee, and maybe it's got legs. We'll see what happens.
Yeah, I didn't.
So
take
now they got a
notice.
committee and they can do it,
Yeah.
So a few of the things that was discussed at the meeting today, because again, I didn't make specific recommendations for changing what city council committees should exist. I simply implored the councilors to think about
the
it.
issue gets directed, though.
Yeah, because if you right now there are 11 committees, and
11. Okay.
and I was actually, it's funny how things sometimes work out the way you think it. I was thinking, okay, so Quentin Zondervan is now on the city council. I figured he's got to want to have climate change in some committee, right? So when they were going around at the meeting today asking for suggestions from particular councilors, right on target, Quentin Zondervan says, well, I'd like to know if there's a actual place to put matters of climate change. Right? All right, very predictable, right? And normally you would just pitch it off to the Health and Environment Committee, right?
However, it's public safety. Greg Kelly brought that up, which is an interesting when you think of floods and stuff, and what you deal with.
I didn't bring it up at the meeting because I had decided I wasn't going to really press too hard on any of this, but I was suggesting afterwards when we were speaking, I said, they just came off of a council where there was a report issued at the very end with chaired by Councilor Kelly about resilience. It's sort of the post-Hurricane Sandy mindset. So it's not just climate change; it's how do you deal with adaptability, hardening of infrastructure, and whatever.
Right.
So there's an interesting question. So let's just say you have some initiative, or you want to even discuss, do follow up on this report on resiliency.
Yeah.
Where do you send it? It's not an ordinance.
Can you have dual committees?
You can. You certainly
like
could.
Maybe public utilities and health and fire.
Right, but the thing is, you almost have to do that because the city council committees themselves aren't a perfect match to that.
Exactly.
So this is one of those things where with changing times,
Yeah.
you have to sort of modify things a little bit. So is that a public infrastructure? There is no infrastructure isn't specifically a part of any committee description, but there is public utilities. Is there a public utilities currently?
No, you know what? Yes, it's under transportation, which I would think probably would go there.
Yeah, but it's not a perfect match. I'll give you another example that I didn't want to bring up because I didn't want to provoke controversy, but last term, or maybe it was even 2 terms ago, they were pitching the idea about various modifications for how we do elections.
Oh, right.
Whether it's public financing for municipal elections.
Allowing
it's a serious matter to be discussed.
Yeah.
That people have talked about, well, should you allow non-citizens to vote in municipal elections?
Age 17 to vote in
Right.
school, all those issues.
So where do you send
Yeah.
that? Well, it's sort of by default has gone to the Government Operations Committee.
Yeah.
But I might argue, is that really part of government operations? I'm not so sure it
Rules
is.
and, well,
So,
what would it be part of?
well, I don't know, but the interesting thing, and actually maybe we'll sort of go back here. So what I did is
Yeah.
I have a very cluttered house because I've got a lot of historical books and whatever,
Right.
including these annual reports that the city used to put out every year that honestly, they were like,
I thought they still do. There was one last
they
year.
put out there's the budget
Oh,
book.
the budget book.
which
That's
is
what I'm
big.
thinking of. It's different.
Though it's actually smaller than it used to be.
Okay.
They do put out an annual report, which is really more like a greatest hits pamphlet.
That's true.
It's
Yeah,
like more
right.
like a magazine.
Yeah, like look what we did.
But
Yeah.
in the old days, man, did they put some
Really?
serious effort
So
into
every
annual report.
committee had to have a.
Not so much every
Information.
committee, but the annual reports from the city of Cambridge, it was like the city documents.
Wow.
And it was reports from the fire department, reports from the water department,
Hmm.
reports from the elections department. It was reports on you name it, right? And was highly detailed, and the book itself really would be like 1.5 to 2 inches thick.
Wow.
Heavy too. I mean, honestly, I use it as a weight when I need to.
So how
like,
did you
press
get
things
them?
down.
I mean, they exist in the
I got
Cambridge room, I assume. all
I
those
got some off of
documents? Yeah.
eBay, and I will
Oh.
tell you that some of the books that I have on my shelf are decommissioned copies that were once
Oh
part
my
of the Cambridge
goodness.
Public Library.
So does that mean they don't have a copy?
I'm,
Thing like
sh-
that? We should
you know,
ask our
you-
archivist.
I kind of hope that they have the originals. I think they
Yeah.
have a complete set
I
of
would think
originals.
so.
They may have had duplicates,
Yeah,
you know,
and
for
that's why
public
these are
circulation.
decommissioned. Yeah.
and these are decommissioned ones that I have. But I also got some off of eBay from places from in like Ohio. Somebody just happened
Wow.
to have some. So I've got it from like 1887,
Oh
1911.
my goodness.
some
All
of
right.
it's
So
in
is this part of
1930s.
what you're looking at?
Yeah, so
here?
here's what it is. So they were
Yeah.
gonna be. So this is what I was calling civic nerdiness, right?
Right.
Which is, I guess, defines me in some
Sure.
respects, right? So since they were going to be having this discussion about council rules and council committees, they said, let me go pull out some of the listings of what the
Mhm.
council committees were at various times historically. So
Yes.
actually, let's see if I can just
Yeah.
sort of call some of these guys up here. So what you
Look
see
at
right
that.
here is
Ooh, nicely on the screen there.
right
Yeah.
now in 1887. Remember, the
Wow.
structure of government was different. It was a strong
Yeah, we
mayor
didn't
system.
have the Plan E. Right. That didn't.
Long before Plan E was
Yeah.
even conceived of.
Okay.
We had a strong mayor, but we also had, it was a bicameral legislative body. We had Board of Aldermen and we
Hmm.
had a Common Council. So there were these joint committees of the Common Council, and then there was also standing committees of the Aldermen and standing
So
committees of the
what was
Common
what was the
Council.
difference? I've never heard of that. I mean, why did they both get elected, or were they appointed, one of them?
They were all elected,
Really?
and I
The
couldn't really,
duties were different?
I can't really give a good explanation as to
Huh.
what the differences were, because I should find out more about it, but
Interesting.
you can
Okay.
kind of see how the committees themselves actually reflected
So
certain
this
priorities.
whole column is 1887?
1887.
Oh my goodness.
So, for example, in 1887, there was actually a council committee, a joint committee on the almshouse.
Oh, see, these are mostly
So-
joint, I
so
get
like
it.
public welfare,
Sure,
for,
yeah.
you know, how it deals with
Right.
the poor people, you know, and
Accounts, it's different than finance.
right. So
Interesting.
they had one for dealing with assessors, because remember, this
Mhm.
it wasn't the planning form of government, it wasn't a city manager form of government. So
Mm.
you had to actually have a more watchful eye on the mayor.
Oh, right.
And how the city
Sure.
was actually being run. So the council
Interesting.
had to play a greater
Yeah.
role in all of
Okay.
that. But you know, you had council committees on not only fire, how about fuel?
Right.
So if it
Well,
was 1887,
yeah.
people might actually freeze to death, because you might
Yeah.
actually need to know how people can be assured that people would get adequate supply of coal or whatever.
Well, I
they
guess
needed
fuel,
to-
I guess coal
their
came
homes.
under fuel, maybe.
Yeah, oh yeah. You know, I like this. There's the committee on lamps.
Yeah, so is that like street lamps?
Yeah, there would be
Yeah,
street
okay.
lamps. Remember, these were all new things
Sure.
in 1887,
Oh my God, right.
right?
Ordinances,
in later
printing,
years,
yeah.
it became wires and lamps by 1911.
Yeah, we see that,
right?
yeah,
So
down
they
there,
were
yeah.
laying out electrical infrastructure. It was interesting to me how what was once listed as Roads and Bridges Committee.
Yeah,
Later in years, it was still Roads and Bridges for a while, but then it became Highways
oh.
by 1911. But then it was back to Roads and Bridges by 1938.
Yeah.
I guess there was a period when highways was sort of like the
Interesting.
rage, right?
In 1911, I mean, people barely had cars.
Well, they were building paved
I
roads
guess
then, so it was a real
Wow.
big deal. In fact, if you look at old newspaper articles of the time, they'll tell you the composition of the road, exactly what the materials used were. It was a
Goodness.
big deal at the time.
Yeah.
The point here being simply that
Yeah.
with changing times, they're changing
Sure.
priorities, and the council committees, to some degree, have reflected those.
Yeah.
Just
But look
jump-
at this, they had a meeting on elections and returns.
Yeah, and I was mentioning that because
Yeah.
there's no natural place to pitch
Right.
something having to do with, let's say,
I mean, in our time now.
in our time right now, if you wanted to have a discussion about public financing of municipal elections, for example, you could kick it to government operations, but there's really no natural place for it. But once upon a time, there most certainly would have been.
So did they not have the election commission back then? I guess not. No?
They had the Board of Registrars.
Oh, okay, because
at
that
the
certainly has
time,
changed,
yeah.
yeah.
By 1911, they still had the Board of Registrars, but still no election commission. It was soon after 1911 they changed the form of government,
right.
so that there was no more it was no longer bicameral. I believe it was in 1915-ish they switched to a single council.
Oh,
So that's where the Board of Aldermen sort of went the way of all things.
I see.
Right? But
So 38 is when when
by
was
1938,
Plan E? Yeah.
that's right before Plan E came
Right.
into effect. So you still had a committee on elections and printing. I
Mhm.
find that interesting because
Yeah.
the city used to put out a lot more books,
About
you historical
yeah.
books, the annual
Oh, yeah.
reports. They were very substantial.
True.
The Plan E charter came about, all of that kind of disappeared, right?
What's Americanization and
Well, see, isn't that interesting?
Oh, it's all the immigrants that came in,
Right.
maybe.
So
Sure.
so
Yeah.
there was a real focus that they didn't want to
Yeah.
have uprisings in the streets. So
Yeah.
Americanization was actually a real concept at the time.
Made
You would never
sense.
have that today, though.
No.
I was
Yeah.
thinking about
Yeah.
joking at the council meeting. So
Yeah.
I'd like to bring back the Americanization of
God.
the Education Committee, right?
Isn't that interesting?
But they had military affairs, right?
Plus soldiers' aid, so
And
yeah,
soldiers'
'cause it was much
aid.
more important because there was
you
wars
had
going
active
on. Yeah.
wars and impending
Well,
wars.
we have had active wars.
And
but
now,
different-
by the time you get to the late 90s and ever since,
Yeah,
there
here
was
we
the
go.
Veterans Committee. It wasn't so much
Yeah.
military affairs.
And
so
here's the
much as it
first
was
time you see
veterans.
elder affairs, which is interesting.
Elder
Maybe
affairs.
yeah,
And that-
I didn't
I
see
don't-
it here
Yeah, so that I know that
because people got older.
people got older. I know
They might
Sheila
be.
Russell was on the council
Yeah.
and she was probably chair of the committee on elder affairs.
Interesting.
So that was during the time when they were trying to find
Yeah.
a senior center, and
Right.
eventually cited a senior center.
Mhm.
But there was even a city council committee on sister cities at the
Right.
time.
Oh yeah, I remember
Right.
that. And then when did that go away?
Not sure, but it
Can we
became
go to
it
the
got
next
absorbed
level
into
here?
the. Yeah, sure.
So
So
now,
just
right.
in the more modern era, here's in
Yeah.
2000 there were some changes,
Yeah,
right? They did some reconsolidation. That's when they also
this looks
invented
more
the
like what
roundtable
we have.
rules.
Yeah.
So that's much closer to what we have
Yes.
today.
Yes.
But
So-
not exactly the same.
Right.
I forget, it was like 1938 was the first mention of like public celebrations. Then that
Or was
carried
it
on into.
1938? Let me
I
see.
think it was in 38.
Public prop. Yep, there you go.
Yeah,
You're right.
you go,
I saw
right?
it. Yes. So okay.
Right.
So now we
So
have
by
it as
2000, that's now absorbed into
Right. public facilities, art
arts and celebrations,
Yeah.
right? Okay. So now we grew by 2012 to I believe 17 committees, and that's when it was felt that it was kind of hard
Yeah.
to get everybody to. It would spread too thin.
Right.
So they did this massive consolidation and dropped it to 11, and that's
So
how we
what
stand
it's a-
today.
So it looks like they took community health out.
Right, so it
and
used
put
to
it
be
with
health and
environment.
environment. I think
Yeah.
when Marjorie Decker was on the council.
Oh, that's right. It became again.
She broke it
Oh.
out from health and environment.
I see.
Because she wanted to have community health as its own separate thing.
Oh, but then
I
it
think
went
Henrietta
back.
Davis was
Yeah.
just with the environment. I think partly it's because the two
Mhm.
councilors didn't exactly get along as well, super well.
Mm.
So sometimes that's part of the reason why they restructure things a
Yeah.
little bit as well. And sometimes, some people have particular interests, and then that gets reflected in the composition of the communities.
And university relations.
That was an
kinda did-
invention. I remember
Yeah.
floating the idea.
Only that one
and,
term.
And
Yeah.
it was actually Michael Sullivan when he was
Mhm.
mayor. It's not just that one term. So it continued. I think.
Oh well,
from-
2012 to 2016.
I think university relations was invented around when Michael was mayor, which would have been around
Mhm.
2002-ish.
Oh right, because you don't
around
have
there.
the middle.
Yeah, I
here.
didn't
Okay.
put them all in.
Sure.
I skipped a lot of years.
all right.
And it continues this day, but now it's sort of lumped in together with
Where is
economic development and university
there
relations.
it goes. There it goes.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah. I mean, I was giving a little bit of grief on the sort of absurdity of the Neighborhood and Long-Term Planning Public Facilities Art and Celebrations Committee.
Yeah, it's like
It
trying
seems
to,
like it's quite a bit.
because then it gets a
right.
lot of stuff dumped into there.
Right.
Okay.
So
Well, that's
anyway,
interesting.
so that's just a little
Yeah.
bit of the historical things of my sort of civic nerdiness
Yeah,
and
I
just
like
having
that.
fun looking at my old
Mhm.
books,
Yes.
right? But you know, I think it is actually a matter of some concern to make sure that you can make the best use of the talents of the people in the room. If you've got 9 counselors, they're all coming from different places.
Right.
And if certain people, like,
Have
you
more
know,
expertise.
Councillor Zondervan is very, very big on
Climate
climate change
change
related
and-
things.
yeah.
So,
Mhm.
you know, certainly I would hope he would be on, if not chairing a committee that is specific to
Right.
that, right? And, you know, there are sort of natural matchups, but it's not always so perfect. You know, I was looking at that list of 11 saying, well, who would I put in as chair if I was mayor? And
Hmm.
I'm not so sure about a lot of them.
Yeah.
You know, it's not such an easy call. But it's, you know, it's something
Can
they
you
have
be
to
chair
take
of more than one committee?
up. Yes, in fact, well, with
Probably
11
have- with
committees, you
11
have
well,
to, actually.
11, yeah.
So I think there were times where it was kind of a standard that everybody should be, when we had 17 committees, there was sort of an
That's
expectation
crazy,
you should
yeah.
be a chair or a co-chair of at least 2 committees.
So does every committee have to have a co-chair? Because that would
No.
make it,
No.
oh, because
I
to me that would make it easier if you can't make them, at least you get it covered.
Right. I think when they first introduced the idea of co-chairs, it was, quite honestly, it was because it was around the time when they were introducing the idea of council aides.
Oh.
And they were trying to sort of legitimize the importance of these big ones. They need this extra staff to support.
Oh.
And that, you know, was sort of part of the song and dance at the
Yeah.
time. But there are some committees that used to be committees of 3. I think we still have committees of 3.
Really?
Yeah, and committees of 5, and then committees of the whole, which is 9.
So who keeps track of, I mean, you seem to know how many times they've each met. Is
Yeah.
that public knowledge somewhere?
You know, the thing is, whenever they issue committee reports to the
You'd have to
council,
just
you
keep
can-
track of that.
Yeah, and I just keep track of it.
So are
Yeah.
there any committees that never meet?
There are some that rarely meet, like you know, maybe this is a good thing, but over
Yeah.
time, the veterans, because there are fewer veterans, because fewer
Well, now it's
wars,
put into human services,
right,
yeah.
so they would meet, but largely because of the human services part. But I
Right,
think prior to the consolidation, you could
They had
very
a
well
separate-
not even have the Veterans
True.
Committee meeting
Yeah.
at all, right? There have been some committees that have
Yeah.
met very little, like the Civic Unity, because it's almost a discretionary, just by its very nature.
right. Now, economic development, they did the retail strategy?
Yes, they
Okay,
did.
Okay.
So Jan Devereaux was the chair of that
Right.
in the previous term, so
Okay.
they took on
And
certain
public
initiatives.
safety, wasn't
Craig
Craig that?
Kelly was the
Okay.
chair of that.
What
Yeah.
about transportation, who was
I
that?
think it was Tim Toomey in the
Did
previous
they
term.
meet a lot?
No, not really. And in
'Cause
fact, speaking of that,
that's right, the bicycles really should have been
yeah,
part
I
of
mean, I
that.
thought that was
Maybe it should be mobility.
yeah,
Maybe
sometimes
we should change that name.
could be, yeah. I mean, Envision Cambridge is using the term mobility a
Yeah.
lot more now. But you know, it used to be a committee on traffic, transportation, and parking. Now
Yeah,
it's
I think it
I forget
should,
what it's
yeah.
called right now.
It's
But-
transportation and public utilities.
Yeah, I thought a real misstep of the last
Yeah.
council was with all the controversy about bicycle
Bicycles and
infrastructure
yeah,
and how to do that. You know, it basically was brought into one committee that Councilor Madison chaired that was,
the neighborhood,
and
yeah.
it was driven largely by, you know, I don't know, agendas,
Mhm.
as opposed to trying to take a more of a comprehensive transportation view of the whole picture, not
Right.
just we're going to get those white posts stuck in the streets
Right.
type of viewpoint, right?
Mhm.
I think it would have been better had it been done by the transportation committee, but
Yeah.
but if the chair is not willing to meet, that's a problem.
And who was the chair
I think
again?
it might have been Councilor Toomey,
Okay.
right?
Yeah.
You know,
Well, hopefully that's given a little more credence this term, because I
Right.
think they're gonna rightfully get more of those issues.
I would hope so, and
Yeah.
I hope that one good aspect I hope of this current council term is that they will view things a little more comprehensively,
Yes.
rather than just sort of flash in the pan
Yeah. I
activism.
think they will. I think it's a
No,
different feel.
I'm optimistic.
Mhm. Me
I'm very
too.
much
Yeah.
optimistic. You know, but anyway, we're moving in that direction, and we'll see. You know, and I'm not so sure when this all comes to fruition, but ultimately they'll adopt rules. The goal is to have this before the council this coming Monday,
Mhm.
and if I'm not mistaken, though, the mayor could then start appointing committees just right away based on the presumption of these rules being adopted. They still technically have to, quote, lay on the table
Right.
for at least a meeting
Yeah.
before they get fully adopted. So, but it doesn't matter in a sense, because once they're settled, they can lay on the table, be fully adopted, but we all know that what they are,
Right.
and the mayor can start making the appointments, you know, and presumably will, so we can get going.
Probably from now until then, people are already. Now, are you allowed to just talk to each other without violating an open meeting law?
You know, there was a little bit of a discussion
Yeah.
about some of these fringy issues about
Yeah.
open meeting violations, but, you know, scheduling meetings or saying what we'd like to talk about, that's not the same as
Yeah, or
getting
seeing
into
someone in the
policy
hallway,
details.
it's different, right? I mean, if
Yeah.
you schedule a meeting, then it becomes a meeting, and then it
Right.
should be subject to that, I guess.
My personal feeling is councilors should just do what seems right.
Yeah,
And if there's a violation, no whistle, no foul. So
I
unless somebody
agree.
really makes an issue of
I
something,
agree,
I say just
yeah.
move forward under the presumption that just act responsibly. And if somebody says, well, you really shouldn't be doing that, then okay, then modify. But running scared out of fear of open meeting violations to me is just silly.
I mean, what happens when they meet in the Oval Office? Is that an open meeting?
I don't think there is an open meeting law at the federal level.
Okay.
In fact, I don't think the state legislature
I
has it
think
even
so.
applied to their own deliberations.
Really?
But it applies to cities and towns.
Interesting.
Yeah, so, or at least they have a somewhat different interpretation.
My
for their
copy of Fire
purposes.
and Fury is already waiting for me at the public.
Really?
I don't know how I got it so fast. Not that I want, but I just figured, why not?
I'm still successfully tuning out most of
Okay.
the
Yeah.
presidential level.
Well, that's
Discussions.
somebody else looking at it, so,
Great.
anyway.
So anyway, we'll have rules. The council will meet next week, and they'll start, getting into substance. I'm looking forward to see what kind of council orders the new councilors start submitting. Once they
Yeah.
get their sea legs and realize they can do it and they can initiate
Right.
processes.
And I think they're gonna ease into it. That's my impression of the new
That is my
councilors.
impression as well.
Listen and learn
Listen and learn,
first.
so.
Yeah.
Anyway,
Okay.
see you in
See
a
you
couple
next
minutes.
segment.